Hellblade 2: Senua's Saga is the most impressive looking game ever created. It really lets you see through Senua's eyes. Okay, all jokes aside, it seriously is the greatest looking video game to have ever been created. It's the follow-up to Ninja Theory's 2017 success, Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade 2 was one of the most emotionally impactful games I've played in years. I personally think it's absolutely impressive and truly well crafted. But on release day, that's not what Twitter was telling me. I saw someone saying how disappointed they were in this game. They mentioned how lackluster and mundane the combat was. They talked about how uninteresting the gameplay was in general. Then in passing, they said the narrative did something really impressive. And then they were right back to being utterly and completely disappointed. According to the first few days of Twitter after this game released, lots of people felt this same way. When I searched Hellblade 2, I found all sorts of tweets like these.
Hellblade 2 was super disappointing, to the point I find myself wondering why it even has gameplay. 6 hours of gameplay.
Too much focus on story.
Hellblade 2 looks great.
Not much else going for it.
Very sad to say we are giving Hellblade 2 a 3 out of 10.
An unnecessary sequel.
It's so boring we fell asleep.
Hellblade 2 isn't doing big numbers because we live in a TikTok Fortnite generation.
Just say you love Hellblade 2 despite its flaws. It's no need to create a false narrative to justify your love of a
Mediocre game. Mediocre game. Mediocre game. Mediocre game. Mediocre game. A 3 out of 10.
Are these Twitter takes right? Is the game a 3 out of 10? One of the worst experiences you could ever have in interactive media. Of course not! These takes are completely and utterly ridiculous. People obviously get to have an opinion on games and they can dislike games, but when you try to pretend like this game doesn't do anything special or important, that's ridiculous.
Ridiculous!
Here's an example. I think Stardew Valley is a significantly unentertaining and unfun game, but I don't think that objectively it's bad. I think it's great at what it's trying to do, but what it's trying to do just happens to be something I do not ever want to play. That doesn't mean that I think it's a 3 out of 10 game. Hellblade 2 did some of the most impressive work in atmosphere, character writing and acting, and overall narrative experience that I've ever seen in video games. Not to mention, it's the most beautiful game ever created, without exception. It's positively bleeding beauty out of every orifice. That might be a weird way to say that. Look, well, my dumb 2080 Super graphics card has to play this thing on low settings. But even on low settings, the game looks out of this flipping world. Then when you see it on high settings... But even the game's critics are split. Gamespot says it's a 6 out of 10. Forbes says it's a 7. IGN says it's an 8. Game Informer says it's a 9. And Eurogamer says it's a 10. So here's the question then. Does the narrative, the characters, the presentation, the graphics, the animation, all have such little weight in the calculus of a score as to warrant a 6 or even a 3, despite the fact that it's a masterclass in all of those aforementioned departments?
I journey to these darkest lands to heal those overcome by fear and hate. However dark it seemed, I always found a ray of light. In this wretched land, by far the darkest of them all, it seemed the shadow would never lift. But I knew I would find my light.
Who is he? He knows her.
We feel across us, reaching out to us in the dark. You have to help him, Senua. This is our quest. This is our destiny. Your mission.
Senua, would you give your life for these outsiders?
In my darkest hour, it was an outsider who saved me.
These critiques are so disingenuous as to be appalling. But let's just get right into the critiques. It's short. Real. It is short. Took me 8 hours to finish, and that included my time spent in photo mode. But I did not seek out and find a fair portion of the lore. If I had done that, maybe it would have been a 9 or 10 hour game. Still short. God of War Ragnarok took me like 50 hours to 100%. Spider-Man 2 only took me like 15 hours to 100%. Does that mean that if Ragnarok is a 10 out of 10, the maximum possible score Spider-Man 2 could get is a 6.5 because of the length?
Fake announcement.
Just hearing that, you instinctively know how ridiculous that sounds. Here's another example. Journey. It was the final nail in the "can video games be art" debate of the 90s and early 2000s. It's got a 92 on Metacritic. An astounding and captivating video game experience. Journey is a total of 2 hours long. Plus, Hellblade 1 was only 8 hours. Journey was 2 hours for $15. Hellblade 1 was 8 hours for $30. And Hellblade 2 is included with a Game Pass subscription. So you can play its 8 hours for $10. I'm extremely poor. When you're single, you can sort of afford to be poor. But even in my situation, $10 for 8 hours did not perturb me in the slightest. So A, it's not 5 hours, and B, this is not a valid argument, in my opinion. What else we got complaints about on this game?
I find myself wondering why it even has gameplay if the combat is going to be that dull.
For a guy named Blessing, you're sure slinging a lot of curses at this game. I'm sorry, that was bad. Kind of Funny Games guys are great. Except Greg and Blessing are both big dumbs on their takes about Hellblade 2. Here is some combat from Hellblade 2. The first thing you'll notice about it is likely how visceral and intense it is. You get a perfect parry, and you can just one-shot a lot of guys. It's brutal, visceral, and desperate. And it does one of my favorite things in video games. No heads-up display. Nothing to get in between you and the game. It fits so precisely and cleanly into the presentation of the game, and it does one of my favorite D&D things. The whole combat experience is telling you a story. Every time someone died around me in combat, I felt the weight of it. In this example, I mistimed a parry, and as Senua stumbles backwards, a man comes running in to stop the enemy from pushing his advantage, and he dies for it. I tried to block an unblockable attack, and this man died because of it. This story is fundamentally about loss and duty.
She's always been afraid of the dark. The deep, still silence that blinds her eyes till she thinks she will never see again. But there is a thread this time. Connects her to the ones above. She has promises to keep. She will not let them down.
For Senua, the weight of death constantly threatens to drown her, and the weight of duty constantly gives her reason to live.
I carry it with me.
To hold on to it.
It drives me forward.
She cannot forget.
It's a promise. Not a prison.
Keep it close. Don't let the past stop you. Don't let it drag you down. Your destiny awaits. Look up.
And you feel both of those weights in these moments. But even if you're perfect at combat, People will still die. War and death is horrible and painful and desperate, and the game doesn't try to glorify it, it tries to represent it. The combat doesn't just reinforce the narrative, it is the narrative. It lives the narrative, it creates the narrative.
You bring death wherever you go.
Carry it with you. Bring it to everyone you meet. Blood. Death follows you.
And that's really the core of my problem with these extremely negative reviews. They don't give a donkey's duker about narrative. I already made a video about this, but Elden Ring has one of the worst narrative experiences that AAA games have to offer. Elden Ring was absolutely swimming in 10 out of 10 reviews, and it absolutely was one of the stupidest and worst presented narratives in popular video games. This scene alone is better than the total of Elden Ring's story presentation.
You hold your breath until you come. Then you gasp and the water rushes in. The pain in your chest.
But people will sacrifice narrative on the altar of gameplay faster than a goose in a snake duck pit. But it's a video game, why does narrative mean anything? Why don't we all do like C-Dog VA and skip all cutscenes?
So what's the opinion on skipping cutscenes?
On your first play?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I skip like all cutscenes. I'm also a voice actor as well.
So you're just like boring. I don't want to just skip to the gameplay.
Yeah,
That's exactly what he did. You don't know what's going on. You just like shoot, jump.
I'll tell you why we don't do that. Because video games can be more than mindless. What's the difference between Candy Crush and Ghost of Tsushima?
I did what I had to. For them.
Is this how you want to be remembered?
He defended us.
By spreading fear and chaos.
We are at war.
And you are acting like the enemy.
The story, the presentation, the weight, the experience. Ghost of Tsushima has worth beyond its distraction, and Candy Crush does not. Ghost of Tsushima has something to say. Hellblade 2 has something to say. I love Enter the Gungeon. It's my favorite roguelike by a large margin, but if I had to pick one game to be wiped from existence, Hellblade 2 or Enter the Gungeon, I would pick Enter the Gungeon without question or hesitation. This game has something to say, and it spoke it with grace and finesse. And scare me up a possum and call me Christian Bale if it isn't the most beautiful looking game I've ever seen. And that matters. If this scene isn't compelling to you in some way, then maybe this game isn't for you. If this doesn't strike you, then maybe this game isn't for you. Beauty and animation and character does matter. And this game is rich with all three. To be so willfully dismissive of them is honestly disappointing from some individuals that I respect. I mean, it's all opinions. It's all opinions about video games. So, like, why am I getting so crazy about it? I don't know. I just feel crazy. I feel crazy about it, okay? That's why I'm making this video. Because I'm feeling crazy about it. Even though maybe it's not that big of a deal. But narrative is under attack constantly by mobile games and big corporations. They want you to grind the game more and think about the game less. All mobile games do this, and all corporations push for this to happen as well. If every game could monetize like Genshin Impact does, then every corporate head would be pooping their pants with extreme excitement. If there was never another game like Hellblade 2 in the history of video games, these publishers would be thrilled about it. They don't care about it being interesting or dynamic or artful or telling you something. They just want to monetize. They just want to get cash out of your wallet and into their bank accounts. And that's the only thing that they care about. They want you to stay endlessly in their ecosystem so they have endless chances to sell you more drivel. Narrative matters, and so does the presentation of the narrative. The narrative in Baldur's Gate 3 is some great stuff. It's super interesting and dynamic. But let's get something straight. Hellblade 2 and Baldur's Gate 3's narrative is not experienced in the same way. Here's someone's brains getting eaten in Baldur's Gate 3.
Warm, wet tentacles wrap themselves around your head, and for the first time in your life, you're perfectly happy.
Here is someone's brains getting eaten in Hellblade 2. It is not the same experience. The presentation of the narrative matters. And this is not even me saying that Baldur's Gate 3 is a bad presentation. It's just there's a big difference in emotional impact between those two experiences. Hellblade 2 has the best facial animation that has ever existed in video games. It's doing a lot of the best ever in existence. And more important, it uses that mastery in interesting and creative ways to speak to you. To tell you a story of a woman full of doubt and pain, but anchored by determination and hope. It uses its beauty and creative presentation to awe, disgust, and distress.
See how small you are. Do you see how the pitiless world stamps you down?
It uses its beauty and presentation to fill you with wonder and dread and remorse. And it does this better than most games could ever dream or imagine. This game had something to say, and I was affected and influenced by it. Narrative matters. Presentation matters. If we live in a world where everyone followed Gamespot's lead and gave this a 6 out of 10, it would blow your mind to see just how fast we fall into a dystopian world where Diablo 4 grinding, Honkai Star Rail grinding, Destiny 2 grinding is the only experience available. And believe me, I know a thing or two about Destiny 2 grinding. Oops. Oh, wow. Sorry, this is an extremely serious video that I am creating. You know what that 6 out of 10 score says to production companies? It says that you don't care about the things that make Hellblade 2 a triumph. You don't care about narrative, beauty, presentation, acting, and animation. They do not matter to you. And so production companies will act on that, and they'll stop funding their inclusion in video games. You might think Call of Duty is the biggest game to have ever gamed. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 had $1 billion in sales. But you know what had $2 billion in sales? Call of Duty Mobile. What? And you know what has had over $20 billion in revenue? Not just sales? Candy Crush Saga. Why did Konami fire Hideo Kojima and stop making mainstream video games? Because it's not where the money is. You can make more money with a no-effort, no-cost, mobile abomination as you can with a critically acclaimed Metal Gear Solid. Hellblade 2 dares to be the exact opposite of Candy Crush. It's artful, thoughtful, emotional, and more than a sum of its parts. Candy Crush is a soulless means to milk money out of you by getting you to think less and click more. Hellblade 2 is a good video game, It's an incredible video game. And it's included in Game Pass, so you don't even have to buy it. What a steal! Man, I was crazy about this one. This one was crazy. Sorry to get so crazy on you, but you know, I was just being pretty upset with 3 out of 10. This 3 out of 10 thing, that really got me. It got me going. Holy cow. Hey, well, if you like the video, go ahead and, hit a subscribe. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.